Thanks, Chris. Liege Games. Let's do this. Upcoming Kickstarters for next week, the week of May 25-ish. As always, a few surprises, a couple bigger names. Month of May is definitely not going to end without a bang, folks. So you got to look at your wallet, you got to look at the screen and kind of see where the make it or break it is. Put out a top 10 earlier this week. Hope it was interesting to you. Got a couple more of those on the way that'll maybe be of interest. Maybe just good discussion points, if nothing else. Inching closer to 3,000. Love it. Thank you again. That's it. That's not why you're here. Let's talk about the upcoming games. What do you need to know and what is on the horizon for next week? Look, I'm starting with the biggest one. I'm not bearing the lead this week. The biggest one coming next week, May 25, that is The Witcher, The Old World. ADC Blackfire Entertainment, Project Red. We're going to see what this actually looks like and how many millions or seven figures it's going to raise. That's the big question. What is it actually going to look like? Now, there's a couple videos already out of a solo two-player mode, but we know for the longest time, since the information has been out there for the last, probably weeks or months, that this is a competitive head-to-head game. And a lot of people have expressed their own very varied opinions on how they feel about a game that I think a lot of us thought was going to be more cooperative in nature in the first place. Say what you will. Now, the solo comes with the base game, but there is going to be, apparently, a multiplayer cooperative mode expansion, if you will, that is going to be free for backers per what's on the Board Game Geek forums right now. The thing we haven't seen, though, or heard, as far as I know at this point, is the price point. Now, Board Game Co. just released an interview earlier this week with the designer, so if you haven't checked that out, go check that out. Maybe there's some details in there that I haven't seen yet or that I haven't heard about, but I'd be interested to know because I think that's going to be the big make it or break it. I mean, they have something like between 20 and 30 or something like that, 1,000 people that are following the launch of this campaign, and you're going to have a lot of video game tie-in backers looking for this IP, just as you most recently saw with Monster Hunter, the board game as well. And again, when you have things like miniatures that look like this and art that looks like this and ties into the game with the lore that's out there, what is the price point going to look like? And is it going to be more than we think? And say what you will about Steamforged Games, but they put the price point for Monster Hunter out there well in advance. And so that there were no surprises on launch day. And I think you're going to see a lot of complaining one way or the other with the price point when this launches, because you just can't please everybody. But what is the gameplay going to look like in more detail? Who else is going to have gameplay videos up? Who else is going to have gameplay videos up? I would imagine if Board Game Co. is interviewing the designer, he's going to have a video as well. And who knows who else at this point. So we'll kind of see. I have no idea. I have no idea on this one. I haven't watched the gameplay videos too much in depth at all yet. And so my mind is going into this one completely neutral, completely blank slate, wanting to see, because again, as I've mentioned before, I have no affiliation with the IP in general, one way or the other, as a fan or a non-fan. I have not played the video games. I'm not used to the lore. I've not read the books, anything like that. So I'm going in with a completely open mind, and we're going to see the product on whether or not the board game side impresses me. Not how close it is to said IP lore in the first place, not what I expected it to be, based on that, but just, are you giving me a product that is very enticing and is not just purely miniature based? So we'll see when that launches on the 25th. Also launching on the 25th, Lockup with the expansion Breakout. Now, if you're not familiar with the base game, this is set in the role player universe. Only unlike the other role player games or cartographers, which are all sort of different schemes of things and different mechanisms, this one again takes it for a spin, and this is a worker placement. It is a competitive worker placement from 1 to 5 players, each one different type of race or species of goblinoid-esque D&D monsters that are locked in this prison. You are trying in the base game to allocate your crew of same species, to the most power in the most areas of the prison over 3 rounds or phases. The first, roll call, where you're literally just placing your guys around in different places. Lights out, while you're scoring those areas. And then the patrol phase, where resources are generated. High suspicion is alerting the guards to your activities, and you may be raided or subject to search. Rinse and repeat. It is, as I've heard it described, a little bit of a press your luck worker placement type game, which again is sort of an odd combination, but I find that a lot of those odd combinations seem to be working quite well nowadays. So what is Breakout going to add? Breakout is going to add new mechanisms, new ways of earning prestige. You are going to be exploring the labyrinth or the catacombs below the prison in this expansion, hence the digging in the picture. Crafting items, recruiting goons, influencing said legends within the prison, as well as just exploring the catacombs in order to earn those points. So all in all, I've heard this one as sort of one that's flown under a lot of people's radars, and that people that have played it have really liked it. But again, with that combination of mechanisms, the press your luck crowd and the worker placement crowd, there is not a huge Venn diagram of overlap sometimes in that, and so that's probably why it's flown under the radar. That's probably why it's only ranked around 1,200 overall on Board Game Geek, which is still very, very, very respectable. So, is it going to be essential in terms of expansions? And what is the price point going to look like? And how are they going to incentivize you to back during the Kickstarter campaign? That's what we'll see when they launch the campaign on the 25th. So next up is a game that is no Board Game Geek entry, and it's hard to find even any place of it anywhere, but I saw it advertised on one of the Facebook groups. It's a game called So Sus. I believe it is based on, hence the picture. Among Us is sort of the one-person trader trying to kill off the crew while everyone else is trying to discover it while doing their jobs aboard the spaceship. Big online hit, Twitch, Steam, everything that you need to know. How does this port? I've seen numerous references to it of people trying to copy, duplicate, replicate into the tabletop scene, a la maybe recent Stardew Valley, but we'll kind of see when it comes. Is it going to be something that flies under the radar, or is it going to just be sort of unmemorable? I have absolutely no idea, but I wanted to mention it, so there you go. Next up on the 25th, also launching, is Quest Heroes of Sorcado, a lighter 1 to 6 player cooperative fantasy-based game. Scenario-driven with consequences. 8 adventures over which you are building and training and leveling up your character and their stats and abilities. 60-page campaign book, 140 pages of stories and events and adventures. And I've been in contact with the developers, and I have a copy of the first scenario that hopefully I will be putting out at the beginning of this week prior to the launch, so that you can get a little bit of taste firsthand. Now, again, they're going more of the fantasy but lower overhead route. And sometimes these have done very well on Kickstarter, and sometimes these have struggled because, as I've mentioned in the past, what differentiates this from anything else? What is the uniqueness of this compared to other things? Right now, the preview page, and actually it's not really a preview page, but the pre-launch page only has 269 followers. So we'll see what happens and how that translates, because how it is enacted, how it is presented on the page itself could either gain a lot of interest, a la something like Hidden Leaders that just finished that surpassed everyone's expectations, or it could be just another generic fantasy one. And so we'll kind of have to see when time will tell, and how eye-popping is it to people, and then how are the other points, as I've mentioned, like price point and affordability and why back now and all of those sorts of things. So it's going to be interesting to see, and how does it take its nuances slightly differently than the other stuff out there. So we'll have to check it out. My eyes, just as well as with yours, on the 25th. Robot Quest Arena, Hyperspace Kraken. I don't know why. I just had to do that. Sorry. So this is Robot Quest Arena. I mean, basically think of BattleBots, you know, that show that Comedy Central did like way too long ago. I'm going to date myself. And they have basically made this into the board game. It is coming from the recently renamed Wise Wizard Games, who formerly were known as White Wizard Games, a la Star Realms, Hero Realms, those sorts of games. And they have taken now a deck builder of robot battling proportions. And again, robot battling is not what I would normally think of with a deck building mechanic. So it'll be really interesting to see how that is actually incorporated and utilized to set it apart from their other properties. Because when I think of those other properties, they are well thought of, people like them, but I don't want another reskin of those. I want something completely different. And based on the early images, it looks like there's gonna be some miniatures in a deck building game. I'm not sure. I have no idea what to expect on this. Shut Up and Sit Down did a little bit of previewing and discussing it on the Shucks Expo. So there's that element of things. It's a 2 to 4 player game where you're going to be basically going around this terrain. And so it reminds me almost more of like a Tyrants of the Underdark with robots. Not area control, but in terms of battling and being able to sort of move around. So we'll kind of have to wait and see what it actually looks like when these things get out there and what the page looks like. Because again, just like Heroes of Sorcado, I could see this game going in two drastically different directions depending on how the execution is when it is actually launched. They also talk about the fact that there are going to be alliances. So, I mean, I have no idea what to expect with this. I could very well go either way on this thing. So again, eyes are going to be on this to see what it looks like when it launches on the 25th. So I saw this one being advertised on Facebook. Hyperspace! No, actually, space! Kraken. Right? It's like they were reading my mind. No, this is a 1 to 4 player roguelike solo game that is a one book dungeon crawl, if you will. Now, they say you can play it asymmetric multiplayer, but it is really more of a one-player game with an extra mode. Strange aliens, quests, mysteries, exploration. Set up your crew, upgrade your ship, and explore. An automated game master that's sort of going to be running things within the book to help you out. Space combat, monsters in space, a little bit of everything under the sun. So it'll be really interesting to see what this looks like, again, from a price point standpoint, as well as how appealing is it to the non-solo crowd. You know, as usually we see the other way of solo modes tacked on to multiplayer games, this seems more like the solo game potentially, I'm not saying it is, with a multiplayer mode tacked on. And so how fully fleshed out is that going to be? And are you going to be as happy playing this multiplayer as you would be just playing it solo? So, I mean, it looks like a very intriguing concept. I'm very interested to see. It probably isn't going to be for me, thankfully for my wallet. But I know a lot of you have been clamoring and looking at solo stuff. So if you have been looking at solo stuff, I would highly encourage you to check this one out when it launches on the 25th. It sounds a lot different than anything else I've read recently, especially in terms of solo side. Speaking of polyomino games, which we clearly were not, the expansion for the Isle of Cats, Kittens, and Beasts is also launching on the 25th, was just announced like a week ago. So it's fresh, hot off the presses, if you will. Now, what is this game going to be adding? Well, it's going to be adding an expansion that has kittens and various mythological beasts to interact with your cats and your fish that you're using to get them onto your boat in the first place. There is also apparently going to be a roll and write in the same realm, in the same theme, launching as part of the Kickstarter as well. So if you missed it the first time, it is probably one of, overall, I'm speaking general now, not necessarily for myself, one of the more highly thought of polyomino games, not just recently, but in general, now that it's been out for, a year or two. So it has that sort of pedigree. It's also a little bit more complex than a lot of the other polyomino games in how you are doing the phases and the rounds to collect those cats, to get them on your boat, to Tetris them in the first place. So that is going to appeal to some people, and that is definitely not appealing to others when you're playing a polyomino type game. Roll and Write is called Explore and Draw. I mean, there you go. It's by Frank West, the City of Games, and it says the expansion is going to come with 3 separate modules. The Kitten module, which is the easy module, the Beast module, which is the medium module, and the Events module, which is the hard module. And when I say difficulty, I mean in terms of complexity. Kittens are adding the element of trying to be the fastest player on each day. Ancient Beasts are adding these ancient beasts that you're trying to form friendships with and relationships with in terms of scoring points. And the event module is adding special events in rounds 1 and 5 and changing how you score in rounds 2, 3, and 4. Essentially, forcing you to change your strategy on the fly within the game, as if you may have already mastered it in the first place, creating that other element of depth. Again, price point. How is the price point for... I'm assuming what they're going to be offering is, as they did with City of Kings in the first place, for the first, second, and whatever third Kickstarters that they did, is how does that price point compare from the first campaign to the second campaign? Is there going to be an upgrade? Is it going to be the same price? Again, how much of the funding is going to be from that? How much of the funding is going to be from just the expansion? I mean, we just saw level 99 games run into a little bit of difficulty when it came to Imperial Spells and Steam when the expansion was a little bit too low. Or are they going to go more of the other route from another recent campaign or two where they pledge lock the roll and write a la Hellboy, into the only pledge available in the first place. So you either get the, Kittens and Beasts pledge level plus the Explore and Draw, or you get neither. You can't add them separately. Now, I doubt they would do that. I don't think Frank West is going to do that, but it'll be interesting to see what sort of bundles there are, what sort of discount, what sort of price point, what sort of incentive, and I'll be watching it because I have the base game. I got it on the first Kickstarter with the expansion. So there you go, on the 25th. Also launching on the 25th, Tussie, Mussie by Elizabeth Hargrave, the expansion collection, offering 3 new expansions to this flower-based game. 18 card set, I cut, you choose type of mechanism when you're playing. It is played over 3 rounds. It's a very straightforward game. You take 2 cards off the top of the deck, you get to look at them both, you play one face up, you play one face down, the other person gets to choose which one they want. Game ends when each person has 4 cards. That's it. So what are you getting with the new expansions? The orange cards here are adding just more flowers. The greenery adds negative points to the game, and ribbons are adding shared goals that can be accomplished for more points for endgame scoring. Again, sort of flew under the radar. I think it was her first design after Wingspan. But it'll be interesting to see. Again, we've seen a lot of popularity of these small box, small card games, and this is adding a little bit of modularity to that type of thing. So that's generally well received, usually a low price point, usually easy hit at the table. So check it out when it launches on the 25th. The 2017 combination of deck builder and area control, Path of Light and Shadow, which has sort of immensely flown under the radar, which has sort of gotten a little bit of resurgence in renown lately, I've seen, just announced that they are offering an expansion from Indie Board and Cards that is also going to be launching on the 25th. Now, the biggest complaint and issue with the first one was the game was good, but it offered a lot of these special cards that were Kickstarter exclusive that were not included in the retail edition, enough that the variability and the depth was a little bit criticized at the retail level. I say that as someone who owned the Kickstarter version. Now, this was a weird mix because, anecdotal side note right now, we played it several times, and I liked it, but we played it completely wrong. And when we started playing it right, we actually almost preferred the way we were playing it wrong. And for better or for worse, I just couldn't get that out of my head, so I ended up trading it away, and it worked out well. But it is definitely flown under a lot of the radar. It is definitely one of those, especially in 2017, that was doing unusual things with the combination of those mechanisms. And to see it get more support, a lot of people are super excited. Now, does a lot of people actually equate to a lot of funding? I have no idea, because I've heard just rumblings about people excited about this. But is that just a vocal minority, or is that more of a sign of things to come? And these are 2 of the cards, for example. I mean, the mechanisms are relatively straightforward. And what it's also doing is it has this unique mechanism of where you have basically 4 different factions that you're going to be recruiting and building through and upgrading along sort of a tech tree-ish card style game. And you can see sort of here how they get upgraded and the abilities that they're going to be, and that they either have a light or a shadow affiliation, and that is going to push you further on one affiliation or the other, and the farther you are on one side or the other will get you either bonuses or potentially allow you to do detriments to other people to greater extents. And so again, it's got several unique mechanisms, it's got several unique mechanics, especially on top of that being area control. Again, it's not a big area control guy. I think that's where I really probably first or second found that I wasn't a fan of that. But this is going to have a very supported crowd, and I don't think there's going to be any problems with it funding. It's just going to be, okay, how much Kickstarter exclusive is going to be here? Are they going to offer some of the ones from the first time around for retail backers that weren't able to get it the other time? So we'll see, and it'll be interesting to see what they do and how they price it. But that is Path of Light and Shadow, the Solstice expansion that is launching on the 25th. Check it out. Still on the 25th, we have Castlescape from Praetorian Games. This is a 2 to 4 player game. Speaking of deck building and area control, there you go, again. You are representing one of 4 guilds who are in the process of trying to build a castle for the king. Build walls of the castle, recruit, gain renown, but you don't want too many eyes on you because some of the deeds that you're going to be doing aren't quite the most up and up. You're all also starting with hidden goals in this deck builder along with a common deck. You're building walls outward. Whoever contributes the most to each section of the wall is going to get the most infamy or renown. There's going to be inspection that will remove influence, and there's going to be, it says, a high amount of interaction between the players themselves in the first place. They also mention, as you can see here in the cards, where you have more of your market, that is going to be both static as well as rotating. And so it'll be interesting to see how you accomplish that mechanism and balancing of both, especially when they both have their upsides and their downsides. Hungry Gamer has a video preview that's on Board Game Geek. But otherwise, there's not a whole lot of other information. So if that combination, again, really appeals to you, you have 2 games back to back, both launching on the 25th, that you need to have your eyes on and you need to be checking out when it launches. Also launching on the 25th is Dice of Dragons, a 2 to 6 player game where you are fighting against a dragon who has captured gold, and you are trying to get that gold back for your realm, bring it back to the kingdom, and win favor of the crown in the first place. It is a push your luck resource management style game where you're able to pass the dice to players as your luck sort of runs out. They're adding a co-op mode, and the game plays until all of the gold is taken from the dragon. There are a couple preview videos on Board Game Geek already, as well as a little bit of a playthrough. So if you're interested in something more dragon-esque, fantasy-esque, with a little bit of roll press your luck, you might want to check this out, Dice of Dragons, when it launches on the 25th. Next up, launching on the 28th, is Fjordar. And Fjordar is going to be another very interesting one, and I've seen more on social media for this one than some of the others. It's a 1 to 4 player game set in the Norwegian Civil War. Area majority, modularity, deck building-ish type game where you are trying to spread your influence out over the 110-year span that the game takes place in. And you are doing it with actual models and the hex-based system that you can see here. Play cards, move your armies, establish supply lines. Resolve combat, use those abilities on the map to interact. Also, have the variety of being able to perform different abilities and actions at various different types of places on the map in the first place as well. Places like villages, shipyards, churches, to be able to maximize your influence. Now, there are 2 videos already up on Board Game Geek. A how to play from Gaming Rules, and then a how to play on Tabletop Simulator. So again, there's a little bit more information out there already pre-launch. So again, what is the price point going to be on a game like this? Especially when you see components that look like this, as opposed to your usual cardboard chits or markers. And how deep is it going to run? How long is it going to run? Because as you can see, there's a lot of stuff going on the board here. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like, and we'll have more details when it launches on the 28th. Now we have Paris, the expansion for Paris, the game from 2020. I'm not going to try and pronounce the expansion name because, as you know, that is not where my strength lies. What you're doing in the base game of Paris, you're real estate developers in the time of expansion and development in the city of Paris. You are trying to invest wisely and build accordingly around the city. This is a self-described middleweight Euro-style Kramer and Kiesling type of game. It emphasizes on the Board Game Geek page short player turns and a point salad type mechanism in terms of how you're scoring. This was originally on Kickstarter, and the expansion, obviously, is following suit. So what is the expansion adding to this? The expansion is adding more types of development around the famous circle in Paris. Now, it is taking a new spin on an asymmetric starting power, as well as bonus tiles and strategy tiles that you're going to be able to use. This is, as you can see in the picture, area majority, set collection, and tile placement with some hidden information. Now, there's no videos up yet, but the very, very brief 4-page rulebook for the game is already up, and it goes through all of said bonus features, including, like I mentioned, bonus tiles, strategy tiles, and then that's about it. So you get the synopsis, and you're just adding a slightly layered element. So this is really an expansion that's not necessarily going to make the game that much longer, but maybe it's going to give you more variance and more nuance. So depending on the price point, I could see if you're an original lover of the base game Paris in the first place, which has a 7.4 and it's ranked 1500 overall on Board Game Geek, this might be worth something picking up, especially in that middleweight Euro style, which we're not seeing a lot of nowadays. So check it out on the 24th. Also launching on the 25th now again, because clearly that's the popular day next week, we have StarFrame, the shipbuilding game. 1 to 4 player, action tactical deck building game, right? So the premise of this game is the station that you're on all of a sudden in space is getting sucked into a black hole. This mysterious alien being comes there and says he has a way out of a ship that you can help him finish that is allowing itself to bend space and time to escape the black hole. However, he needs specific parts in forms of something called hypermatter in order to power the engine, but there can only be one that's built, and he will give it or allow passage for the person who builds the best and provides him with the most material in that sense. So what are you doing in this game? Just like the title says, you are building your ship first and foremost. You are then also having to defend said station that you are all positioned on against enemies who are trying to steal the engine, scavenging as well that hypermatter that is of import from nearby planets, as well as apparently crossing something known as the Abyss for larger, yet I'm sure slightly more dangerous travels or routes for more abundance of the hypermatter. You can see a little bit here on the pictures what you're going to be doing, and this looks very different in terms of how you're building your ship, and obviously these parts are going to have some synergy and some pieces, and you can see all of the various components in the middle, and there's a little bit of a hex style grid as well going on over here. I'm guessing this is also maybe some element of the station in the first place. And then here you have a little bit of a closer up picture of the actual player that you're going to be having, as well as the ship with the various icons that are going to give different upgrades along here in terms of the stats of the ship in the first place. No videos, no rulebook yet on Board Game Geek, but if this slightly different element in terms of deck building, ship building is of interest to you, check it out when it launches on the 25th. Next up, launching on the 28th, this is well outside my wheelhouse, but it is launching and it's sort of on there, so I wanted to mention it, is War Room. This is the second edition for War Room. This is a self-described 2-6 deluxeified war game of World War II. This was one of the 2019 Board Game Geek award nominees for War Game. So it's a pedigree that is, well thought of, I guess, on the war game side of things. You are taking the mantle of command and, doing everything that entails for your side in World War II. Land, air, sea, espionage, you're doing it all. Now, what's going to be new on the second edition? Well, for starters, they say in the Board Game Geek forum, it's going to allow you to play in 30 to 40% time faster. And I guess some war games are hours and 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 hours. So that's probably not insignificant when it comes to that. And here on the website, they give a little bit more detail. They talk about the goal, reducing the weight and cost by approximately 10%. No jumbo expansion offered, but here are your prices, okay? So second edition, $12 less, $40 less MSRP. And they say it's going to be compatible forwards or backwards. No significant changes in the rulebook. Different morale board. More lightweight components. Better storage. Better battle references. And there's a few wish list things. Not stretch goals necessarily, but if they raise enough that they might be able to accomplish. Looks like they have a copy up on Steam that you can play as well. So this is a copy, I think, of the first edition, but you can see how involved and how many different factions that you could play as on each side of the war. Again, as a war game, I'm not going to go into it much more detail, but I know some of you out there wanted to hear this one talked about, and definitely if you're interested in it, you should be checking out the first edition, especially if they say there's not going to be a whole lot of difference between the rules in the first edition and the second edition. You can probably get a lot of your information just based on what's out there already on the Board Game Geek page. So that is War Room, and that is launching on the 28th. So, we might as well just stick with the war theme. This is Fighters of the Pacific, and it's launching on the 26th. This is a 2-player, head-to-head dueling game. It is re-experiencing the war as well as the sea combat from World War II. They say that the game is going to come with the core as well as 2 expansions. The core with everything you're going to need to play. The first expansion being the expansion of the Battle of Midway. And the second expansion being the Battle of Coral Sea. Each of those expansions obviously adding in new types of seacraft as well as aircraft from both the Axis and the Allies. They mentioned that there are going to be 10 different scenarios in the core game alone that you can play through in this grid-style game. Here you can get a little bit better picture of what it looks like from a more overhead view in terms of how your forces are going to be conflicting against each other. As I said before, war games, not my thing, but I know some of you out there really do enjoy them, so I don't mind highlighting them on the what you need to know for next week. Last up, launching on May 27, is Okatoa. This is the first game from Darrington Press, I believe, the company from the guys over at Critical Role that are now putting out tabletop as well. This is a 3 to 5 player semi-co-op game. You are trying to be the last faction of sailors battling against this mighty sea leviathan. It reminds me initially of a multiplayer semi-co-op version of That's My Fish, because what they say is these hexes you're seeing at the bottom are remnants of the wrecked ship that your sailors were on, and they are slowly disappearing. Each person takes on the role of 2 separate colored factions that they're sharing with a neighbor. You can see by the nature of these cards here that there are going to be icons in terms of the upper left as well as the lower left in terms of where you're going to be maneuvering, how you're going to be maneuvering, and what's going to be going on between the various factions. You can also see here about how this is starting to shrink and how it's going to be highly, highly tactical in nature. So the big question is going to be, how does it actually play? Because we all know semi-cooperative is hard to do. Now, this is a different take on semi-cooperative, as in you're sharing sort of also between the 2 cities sort of mechanism, it seems like, combination with that and, tactical, grid-based matching. Tactical grid-based That's My Fish, loss of where you can go. So it'll be really interesting to see how this actually works and what the gameplay actually looks like, because I don't really know what some of those icons are meeting on the cards. So I kind of want to see how this one plays, and I want to see what the price point is. I mean, the big question is also going to be, like, why am I backing this on Kickstarter, right? I saw on the Board Game Geek page right now, when I did this, we'll just pull it up, pre-order at Miniature Market for $29.99. So I have video proof that it's there. So what is the price point going to be on Kickstarter, and why am I going to get it there as opposed to pre-ordering it right now? So it'll be interesting. I want to see what these guys can do. So we'll see when it launches. So that's about it. As always, I mean, there's always stuff out there that is flying under the radar. I wouldn't be surprised, as usual. There will be a couple games that'll pop up along the way. Stuff from this past week's roundup that is, always fun to see and talk about. So anything look interesting to you? Gonna have some more info for you soon on one of these. It's gonna be a good time. Hope your weekend goes well. Play some games, or not. Whatever you have time for. But as always, have fun. Stay classy. Thanks for watching. I'll see you around.